Nikola Radosavljević lived in Jabukovac, a small village in Serbia. Nestled in the rolling hills and surrounded by lush greenery, Jabukovac was a place where everyone knew each other. The village had a serene charm, with its cobblestone streets and rustic houses. Life here moved at a slower pace, and the villagers took pride in their close-knit community. Nikola was a quiet man, a farmer who spent most of his days tending to his fields. He was known for his hard work and dedication to his land. The villagers often saw him working from dawn till dusk, his hands calloused from years of labor. Despite his reserved nature, he was respected by those who knew him. At 39 years old, Nikola had seen his fair share of life's challenges. He had weathered the storms of both nature and personal struggles. His face bore the lines of experience, and his eyes held a depth that spoke of untold stories. Yet he remained a mystery to many, a man of few words but deep thoughts. In a village where everyone knew each other's business, nobody thought Nikola could be violent. He was seen as a gentle soul, someone who wouldn't harm a fly. The villagers often spoke of his kindness, recalling moments when he had helped them in times of need. His quiet demeanor was a stark contrast to the turmoil that lay hidden within. However, beneath the surface, Nikola Radosavljević had a history of mental health problems. He had battled with his inner demons for years, a struggle that few were aware of. His mental health issues were a well-guarded secret, known only to his closest family members. The weight of his condition bore heavily on him, affecting his daily life in ways that were not always visible. Nikola struggled with paranoia and depression, conditions that often left him feeling isolated and misunderstood. There were days when he would retreat into himself, avoiding contact with others. His mind was a battleground, filled with fears and anxieties that he couldn't escape. The villagers noticed his occasional absences but attributed them to the pressures of farm life. He had sought treatment before, visiting the local health center in hopes of finding relief. The doctors had prescribed medication and therapy, but the results were mixed. Some days were better than others, but the shadows of his mind were never far behind. Despite the treatments, Nikola's condition remained a constant struggle. In the months leading up to July 27, 2007, Nikola's mental health took a turn for the worse. Neighbors began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He became more withdrawn, his interactions with others growing increasingly rare. The once familiar figure in the fields was now a distant presence, lost in his own world. He became quiet and stayed away from people, a stark contrast to his earlier, more sociable self. The villagers whispered among themselves, speculating about the reasons for his change. Some thought it was the stress of the harvest season, while others believed it was something more profound. Whatever the cause, Nikola's isolation was palpable. Some said they saw him talking to himself, his conversations with unseen entities a troubling sign. These sightings added to the growing concern among the villagers. They watched from a distance, unsure of how to approach him. The once peaceful village of Jabukovac was now overshadowed by a sense of unease. No one could have guessed the terrible things he was about to do. The events that would unfold on that fateful day would leave an indelible mark on the village and its people. The shadow of Nikola Radosavljević would loom large over Jabukovac, a reminder of the hidden battles that can reside within even the most unassuming individuals. July 27, 2007, started like any other summer day in Jabukovac. The sun was shining, birds were singing. The villagers went about their daily routines, unaware of the impending horror. Children played in the fields, and farmers tended to their crops. The village was alive with the sounds of laughter and the hum of everyday life. It was a picture-perfect day in this serene rural community. But this peaceful scene wouldn't last. Dark clouds began to gather, casting ominous shadows over the village. The atmosphere grew tense, as if nature itself sensed the impending doom. The villagers, still unaware, continued with their day, but a sense of unease began to creep in. Radosavljević's rampage began in his home. It was a modest house, like many others in the village, but on this day, it became the epicenter of a nightmare. Inside, a storm was brewing, one that would soon spill out into the streets of Jabukovac. He had a hunting rifle. This weapon, usually a tool for survival and sport, was about to become an instrument of terror. Radosavljević, a man known to his neighbors, was about to unleash a wave of violence that would forever change the village. He shot and killed his wife, Javorka. She was a beloved member of the community, known for her kindness and warmth. Her death was the first tragic note in a symphony of violence that would soon follow. Then, he shot his two young sons, Stefan and Milan. The boys, full of life and promise, were taken in an instant. Their laughter, which had filled the air just moments before, was silenced forever. The loss was immeasurable, and the village would never be the same. He left his family and walked into the village. Each step he took was heavy with the weight of his actions. The villagers, still unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded, went about their business, oblivious to the danger that was now among them. He went from house to house, shooting his neighbors. The sound of gunfire shattered the peace, and panic spread like wildfire. People ran for their lives, seeking shelter wherever they could. The village, once a haven of tranquility, was now a battleground. The quiet village became a terrifying place. The streets, once filled with the sounds of daily life, were now eerily silent, save for the occasional cry for help. The terror that gripped Jabukovac on that fateful day would leave scars that would never fully heal. The village, and its people, would be forever changed by the events of July 27, 2007. 9 people died that day. Jabukovac Radosavljević, Nikola's wife, was a good mother. Everyone liked her. Their sons Stefan and Milan were just kids. The other victims included older couples, a young woman and a teenage boy. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and families. They were just living their lives when Radosavljević took their futures away. Their deaths shocked Jabukovac and the whole country. The community couldn't understand such a terrible loss. News of the killings spread fast. Police came to Jabukovac, a small village that had never seen such horror before. The peaceful community was shaken to its core, and the arrival of the police brought a mix of relief and fear. The villagers gathered around, whispering among themselves, trying to make sense of the chaos that had descended upon their quiet lives. They started a huge search for Radosavljević. The police formed search parties, combing through every nook and cranny of the village and its surrounding areas. They knew that time was of the essence and every second counted. The officers were determined to find the killer and bring him to justice no matter how long it took. He ran away after the shootings. Radosavljević knew the terrain well, using the dense forest and rural landscape to his advantage. He moved swiftly, trying to stay one step ahead of the authorities. His knowledge of the area made the search even more challenging for the police, who had to navigate the unfamiliar and treacherous terrain. People who saw him told police what he looked like and where he went. Police followed every clue. The villagers, though terrified, were eager to help. They provided detailed descriptions and pointed the officers in the right direction. Every piece of information was crucial, and the police meticulously pieced together the puzzle, hoping it would lead them to Radosavljević. The search went on all night. The officers, armed with flashlights, scoured the area, their beams cutting through the darkness. The night was filled with tension, as every rustle in the bushes and every shadow could potentially be the killer. The relentless pursuit continued, with the police refusing to rest until Radosavljević was found. Everyone in the country was waiting. The news of the manhunt spread like wildfire, and people across the nation were glued to their screens, anxiously awaiting updates. The fear and uncertainty were palpable, as everyone hoped for a swift resolution to the nightmare that had gripped the village of Jabukovac. After a long 14-hour search, they caught Radosavljević. The breakthrough came when a sharp-eyed officer spotted movement in the underbrush. The police moved in quickly, surrounding the area and apprehending the suspect. The relief was immense, as the officers finally had the man responsible for the terror in their custody. He was hiding in a forest. The dense woodland had provided him with cover, but it was not enough to evade the determined search efforts of the police. The officers had methodically searched the forest, leaving no stone unturned, and their persistence had paid off. His terrible acts were finally over. The village of Jabukovac could begin to heal, knowing that the man who had brought so much pain and fear was now behind bars. The police had done their job, and the community could start to rebuild, slowly but surely, from the trauma they had endured. During his trial, Radosavljević's mental health was important. Doctors said he had paranoid schizophrenia. He saw and heard things that weren't real. His lawyers said he wasn't responsible for what he did. They said his mental illness meant he didn't understand that what he did was wrong, but the prosecution said he knew what he was doing. They said the killings were planned. The court had a hard decision to make. In 2008, Radosavljević was found guilty of 9 murders. The court said his mental illness wasn't an excuse. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, the longest sentence in Serbia. This gave the families some peace, but nothing could really make them feel better. The community tried to cope with the tragedy. The Jabukovac massacre changed the village forever. The community was broken by the loss of their friends and neighbors. Their peaceful home was never the same. Years later, the pain is still there. People feel guilty that they survived and are still dealing with the trauma. What happened on July 27, 2007 reminds everyone that life is precious. The Jabukovac massacre was a terrible act of violence. It shocked Serbia and the world, but even with this sadness, there is hope. The community is strong. They have helped each other. They have rebuilt their lives and remember those they lost. They are still healing, and the spirit of Jabukovac lives on.